Michael, who usually organizes the meetup, is not here today. He's somewhere in Asia. So I'll just kick it off by starting the meetup. I think it's very exciting to see a bunch of people here. This past few weeks has felt like years in the blockchain space, or specifically Ethereum, and so it's very exciting. I keep hearing seeing new people and getting excited about all the new possibilities, new developers joining, starting new different things, and that way it's very exciting. I'm from Cape Town in South Africa, and being here, giving a talk here is very exciting. So I hope I get to share some of the things that I've been busy with. So the topic for the day that I'm going to do is something that I call curation markets. The other word for it initially was meme markets, but I felt people misinterpreted what it's supposed to be. But memes is part of the idea. And the subtitle is Through Forests of Dogecoins and Decentralized Bands. And I thought I'd do this talk right at the end. I'll give you an example of what curation markets are and how it works. But I thought it interesting to explain how I got to much of this thinking. And I've been thinking about these problems for quite a while. And it started around 2013 at that point in time. So by the end of it, you'll see things like describing things where, say, the potential for each subreddit or community having a token, the ability to monetize almost every open source project, weird things like decentralized bands, and then right at the end, things like internet meme markets, such as reinventing things like rare Pepe cards. I'm not sure how many people know about that, but I'll explain later some of the different concepts. So about me, I found Bitcoin in 2011. This was when the Java Bitcoin library was first launched. The media picked it up by saying Google is getting into the blockchain Bitcoin space, but it was because Mike Hearn was a developer at Google who launched the thing, right? So it was just like a developer there. Like many in the space at that point in time, being a computer scientist, I found this very fascinating, and I went down a rabbit hole like many of us and spent 2 weeks looking at the thing and realizing this is not supposed to work. And then you go through the code, you go through white paper, and you're realizing this is actually working, and it's very surprising. And it was an amazing thing to realize that there's definitely something here. And at that point in time, I finished my master's degree in social informatics at the end of 2013, and I just kept looking at Bitcoin and keeping an eye on it. Like many of us, we all have tales of not buying enough at the right time, and that happened. It was being at university, a bunch of friends, we pulled some money together. I think Bitcoin was about $2 or $4, and we put a bunch of money together. We put it on some exchange. But getting money from South Africa to these exchanges were very weird at that point in time, and we kept putting the buy orders such that we hoped it would get filled, and it was like, didn't happen. And then at that point, you start trading off like, do you want money to party with, or do you want and so made a mistake there by choosing to party. And so I finished my master's degree in social informatics, but the important thing here is that I did research in information overload, which is how people cope with dealing with too much information on social media sites. And that's important for later because I eventually incorporated much of this research into some of these designs. But during that time, when Bitcoin didn't die and it kept being around, I decided there's definitely something here, I need to check back in. And so I became a Bitcoin developer in 2013. I started building a startup using Bitcoin, and then later on I got deeper into the code. I started doing work on payment channels in Bitcoin. It was a project where you could download a file and would pay per increment of the file being downloaded, as an example. But at that time, it was still, working with these code bases were very difficult. And then, at the end of 2013, one of the most interesting things happened that sent down like a cascade of thoughts that I still haven't managed to release. Like I still think about it every day. Is Dogecoin, right? Dogecoin was this altcoin that was launched as cryptocurrency, which whole purpose was just to be, there's a funny dog, and that's the currency. And what was interesting about it was that it wasn't a cryptocurrency that had any new technical things, right? It was just like, we didn't improve the hashing algorithm, we didn't improve anything else. We just decided we're going to make a currency, and it's going to be much money. It's just going to be this funny thing, and it picked up, and people started using it, and surprisingly, even now, it's still around, and apparently it's almost like $1 billion market cap in the current climate. So this was really fascinating, and seeing people using it, and it got me thinking, like had this weird realization that does it mean that money itself or the value that we ascribe to something could simply be related to sort of a memes network effect, like how many people care about something. So I wrote a blog post at the end of 2013, and I thought about what if you could extrapolate it to people. Like what if we could have currencies for every person? And I said, with Dogecoin, however, there's no theme or other concept besides Doge, the meme. And it's currently very, very big on the net. And Doge harnesses a strong networking effect, and its usefulness as a currency is just that, right? So people used it as this funny thing to connect with other people, and they did things like raising money to get a bobsled team to the Olympics. They got a car into NASCAR. It was one of the most fun things to watch on the net, and I still think one of the most interesting things that have happened. And so I got stuck in this idea of everyone will have their own currency. I got stuck in that idea, so I tried to keep exploring that thing. And so obviously, being a programmer and having this code base out there, I did the most next logical thing, which is, so the question was, can a network effect sustain an altcoin? The coin represents that in-group, and that's why Dogecoin succeeds, right? And that is the hypothesis I wanted to test. Because I got stuck in this idea of there being personal currencies, I decided, wouldn't it be great to launch a Simon coin, right? That's the next logical thing, right? And the plan was to just roll with it, but unfortunately, when I launched it, I said, in the far future, I hope, if this idea takes off, creating a system where buying another person's coins could be simple as walking past them, right? And so there you will have all these network effects trading against each other. But I realized, I don't think it makes sense. There's too many things here that, like awkward incentives, like who will be the miners? Why do they need to get the coin? Like there's some stuff that doesn't make sense. So I went back to the drawing board and thought, okay, what else can we do that I can do where I can launch an altcoin like this and experiment with those hypotheses? And at that point in time, the only thing available was just launching your own altcoin. We don't have Ethereum now where a developer can click deploy a ERC20 token today. Like there wasn't nothing available besides doing your own thing, forking the code, spending 3 weeks looking at it. So I tried to go back and think about it, and I went through this weird detour where I tried to figure out how to do decentralized altcoins and Bitcoin. People thought it was a dumb idea, so I scrapped that and realized it's too complicated. I need something that also has a strong network effect like Dogecoin to try this. And so something else happened at that point in time, which is quite interesting. There is a band in South Africa, called Politica, right? And they're an Afrikaans punk rock band, they're very big. And then someone did a sketch comedy, which was very interesting. So Politica is from Cape Town. That's where their home base is. There was another group that just simply pretended to be the same band, but from a different city. Like they said, we're Politica from Pretoria. Like they literally pretended to be the band. And they did this funny sketch show where they would rock up and say, like, we are the band. And I thought that was an interesting potential to scale music. Like what if everyone could just be the same band? We could just scale music like that and play shows in different parts of the world without the actual same band members having to be in the same spots. So, so I thought, you know what? Decentralized band, decentralized currency. Why don't we put this together? And so the cypherpunks was born. Not the cypherpunks, which is the group of early cryptographers, but the cypherpunks. And so there's a project I started trying to experiment with that. Did it succeed? So the question with that was, can an altcoin represent a decentralized band? This coin represents the in-group of this collective, just like Dogecoin represents the in-group of that specific group. And it's like a game, a focal point game, trying to work together in that regard. So did it work? In some ways it did. More than 100 songs were produced by more than 20 artists across the world. People remixed things from each other, and all the artists released songs as the cypherpunks, like even if you were a different person doing the work. And some of the songs were mildly successful. The highest success goal I set for myself was, could this thing allow one musician to make a living from this? And I don't think we got there, but I learned a lot through this process. Some other weird things happened as well. the South African news picked it up and decided to interview me. And the cool thing about it is I got this headline where I'm fund virtual currency with. Of course, during the interview, they kept asking me about, what about the drugs and blah, 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 blah. It's like, that's not the point. And they kept saying it's South Africa's first virtual currency. That was not the point at all, but it was fun to be on TV and trying to tell people what decentralized bands are, or like the digital currencies in general. And it's still alive. I haven't touched the code in 3 years, but people are still buying it. And this is now also during the recent price rise, people started buying it again. Which made me realize I probably need to go find my old keys, because it is somewhere. I have a bunch. So, people, I think that one of the lessons here is that blockchains are extremely resilient. Like, you might think it died, but it didn't. So it's still around. So the thing about that was interesting, I learned a lot. Aligning incentives are very hard. Trying to figure out how to get this group of people to work together. Because on the one side, you had the miners who were being paid out for this, and why are they getting some of the coins? Couldn't you just give it to new artists that join? That's one of the things. And one thing is, the Bitcoin code base sucks. It's really hard, and it didn't make anything easier to work with, trying to fork it and work with it. And so the rest of 2014, after that project, I did some other stuff in the space trying to do different things. One was a project called Cheers, which would allow it to easily tip any musician. This got some news, like Fred Durst, for some reason, from Limp Bizkit contacted us and told us to sue it. Mojo was something else, would allow any Twitter user to mint their own personal tokens. That was going to be built on Doge Party, which is the counterparty clone on Dogecoin. You see, like that time, this was the only things that were available, really. But unfortunately, both projects kind of derailed for various reasons. And then my money started running out. I managed to spend 2014 working on these weird things because I saved my money in Dogecoin. And my Dogecoin savings were running out. And so at that point in time, I thought, bumping my head into the ceiling with all these different projects, there needs to be something better out there, and luckily something came around, and Ethereum was then just, it was announced, the sale was done, and they started hiring people. So I thought, maybe I should just, join the Ethereum project itself. I am a developer, I got stuck with these problems, let's help more people do these experiments, because it shouldn't take a computer science graduate a month to deploy something like this. Like, it's hard work, and we need to do it more of it more faster. And so I asked for jobs at the Ethereum Foundation, but then Consensus found me, and I became employee number 6 in January 2015. I joined mainly to work on tokens and token designs and music, and I'm still working on token designs and music. So it's been an exciting time. And so in the past 2.5 years, it's been a bit of a blur. And during that time, I've done a lot of research. I came back to the original question is how we can create these networks of value where different memes and different ideas, weird things like decentralized bands, people, maybe even cities, like different things could have their own tokenized value attached to it. And so I did a bunch of research and kept asking that question. And so I wrote a bunch of stuff during that time. And one of the main reasons why I kept thinking about it, because automation is coming. Like, we need more different economic tools so we can work together in the current society. We're going to lose more and more jobs. What is the world going to look like? If we don't invent these new systems, ways to earn a living, then this society is going to crumble or get worse. So how do you allow more memes and networks to have an associated tokenized value without there being a centralized party involved? That would remain the top question for me. So I wrote a bunch of stuff. Things like this one was about increasing novelty in online spaces. This came from my master's research where I just basically said, hey, like when 1,000 people discuss in an IRC channel, it's a mess. You can't have a quality conversation when there's 1,000 people in a chat room. So maybe you can do some sort of way to introduce some fees there to make sure that people can keep a conversation going. Other things was, this was a paper I submitted to the Hong Kong blockchain workshops. Similar idea, maybe we could introduce some fees as more conversations happen to make sure people can keep a conversation going. This was very interesting one. I think it was a very clickbaity headline, but it worked. People read it a lot, which is a concept called organizations that create themselves. So it came from different angles. Like one, which is how do we build these systems so that we can build novel conversations, but also how do you mint these tokens? Like who gets to decide where these come from? Should it be a person or a specific institution? And this blog post was the first time I had this concept of it's simply you set up the rules, and if you agree to the rules, these tokens are minted. So here's an idea where we can create an organization automatically, and it happens just because if you have these rules there, people can coordinate around these specific rules. That sounds pretty vague, but it gets more in-depth later, more detailed. And then probably my favorite one was I eventually combined these two ideas together. In the DevCon 2, Ethereum DevCon 2, I had a conversation with Marcel Pinsky. He's one of my favorite people in the space, also thinking a lot about the same kind of things. Where I eventually combined the two, and that's when I called the idea hashtag markets. So the concept is when you want to coordinate around common goals, ideally you don't want its systems to be reliable and single entity. And my thinking is that there's a lot of people that think about like we should solve problem X, but the only way you can get to solving problem X is to do things like creating an organization in a specific jurisdiction. But what if these people are in different countries? What if these people are in different parts of the world? You need to submit like documentation. It's hard. What if you just have the intent, and tomorrow this organization can exist in a global manner? Like that was one of the questions that I wanted to raise and start thinking towards. Then there's a blog post about like whether your application needs a token, and that came down to the concept of where tokens are useful to coordinate people around a specific solution versus other solutions. So it was basically that this came back from research by Nick Szabo, a brilliant thinker, where he basically describes that collectibles, like shells, were the first forms of money because these collectibles represented my affiliation towards the other people in my tribe. So hard to collect tokens in tribes represent an in-group, and thus reduces the cost to coordinate. Another good example of this is a ticket to an event, right? If there's a cost to get into the event, then you know that the people that are there, you will be able to have a good conversation with because there was this barrier to entry to get in, right? So there's this concept, it eventually evolved, and then I found other research from different disciplines called eustress, which is beneficial stress, which is quite interesting. It's a concept where systems respond favorably to systemic stress, and we see this everywhere. Things like in toxicology, you have mithridatism, which is you inject toxins into the system to improve its immune system, right? These concepts are relatively known in different systems, but we haven't seen this really applied to social systems design. So I thought about the concept of going back to the thing about where fees are introduced dynamically towards conversations. It's like we can invent an algorithm that ultimately fosters coordination through introducing stressors at optimal times. And yeah, this is like I'm getting too deep into these different things, but there's a bunch of blog posts and things that I'll put the slides up as well. But one continuous token models, which is sort of thinking about how these tokens are minted, which is a core component of curation markets. Yeah, this is the concept of eustress, which is you inject something into the system, it stimulates, but if you inject too much of it, there is inhibition. And then probably one of my favorite articles, which was touching upon these things, where I did some research about how organizations changed and where I think where organizations are going to go. The topic is called Jack and the Giant Joint Stock Pepe. And the concept is that these blockchain tokens form kind of new tribes of coordination around various ideas. And because you lower the barrier to entry to do that substantially over any other form of organizational structure that existed before, we're going to see some weird things like people building organizations around memes such as like Pepe memes, right? Because rare Pepe cards are one of the things that are growing as something. It's a hilarious thing. It's just people think it is a joke, but I think it's something to pay attention to in the way organizations structure themselves. And there's no specific institution or entity that builds these organizations. And then finally I came to the final iteration, which I want to share more today about how it works from a technical perspective, which is the concept of curation markets that combine all these things from different areas and put it just into one protocol that I've been learning a lot about how to describe it, and I don't think I've done the best job so far about how this works, but I keep improving. So sharing this today, hopefully you guys come back to me and tell me that didn't make sense, but then I read the white paper and you could have done that better, right? So if you think that will help, please get in touch with me. So the goal is that to go back to the original drawing board, which is allowing each topic, meme, idea, or goal to have an associated token of value to it. And it's useful there because it helps you curate information with that token. And that means we'll be able to mint tokens for subreddits, hashtag, people's memes, and millions of new kinds of organizations. And thus, curation markets was born. And we cool to have some 80s music there. But yeah. So curation markets born, and the next few slides is just like gives a description about how this works from a very top-down level, and then gives also a specific example using a specific community. So these are the different parts about how it works. Okay, the first one is that a specific token can be minted at any time, meaning there's no time limit to creating these tokens, but it's set to a price set by a specific smart contract. That's the point where it says an algorithm decides what the price is, right? The price of the token gets more expensive as more people buy in, right? It's the concept of the ticket to an event gets more expensive the more people you expect to come, right? So the price gets more expensive. The amount that was paid isn't going to someone specifically. It just kept in a communal deposit, sort of collateralized the token. And at any point in time, a token can be taken out or burned, as they use the parlance they use in this space, from the supply, and you can take some money out with you from this deposit. And then the tokens internally are used to bond to curators per subtopics, who then curate information cited with their proportional backing, right? So if I believe person A is a good curator, I'm going to bond my tokens with them, and their goal is to curate information with this tokenized signal, the skin in the game. And if they do a good job, it will attract more attention, increasing the ticket price to get in, to work together, to coordinate together. And there's different parts here that's important. If you just take this, right, then it starts sort of like, kind of like semi-pyramid scheme-ish setup, where you incentivize people to come in after you, because that's where you make benefit. But the important thing is that this hopefully works because of the core benefit, which is tokens are signals to what you're interested in, right? So tokens are your sort of affiliation. It's like the way likes are used from Facebook on Tinder, right? In the sense of your affiliation, all the different tokens you have represent who you are. And that's why Dogecoin had none of this curation stuff, but people still bought Dogecoin because they wanted to be involved in this community. And having this Dogecoin was the signal that you had skin in the game in the community. You were involved with that group of people. So I decided to give like a more clear example of what this actually would look like in practice. So I decided to take a look at the ETH Trader community. So the ETH Trader community is a subreddit which on Reddit, which talks about how you trade Ethereum and its various tokens, like what's good market strategies, maybe share some news, maybe share some funny pics and so forth. But for this example, they think the community wants to get around to curate good technical analysis of these charts, of these prices and things. And so it starts off by there being no tokens in the supply, and for just this explanation, sort of the algorithm that decides the price I made is very simple, very digestible, but in practice it's a bit more complicated. So you start off by saying there's 0 tokens in the supply, it costs 1 Ether per token. And you say, I want to be part of this community, I want an ETH Trader token. So person A buys 1 token, there's now 1 token in the supply overall, and the new cost good went up. There's now, for a new person to get in, it would cost 2 Ether. And then in this communal pool, there's 1 Ether. So that just stays there. Person B comes and says, hey, I think you're onto something here. I want to be a part of this community. I'll also buy a token. Now there's 2 tokens in supply, the price went up for the next person to come in, and the pool got larger. Same for person C. Same thing goes on. This is the state of the curation market. And then person A decides, hang on, I want another token. I want 2 tokens. So overall now, the cost would be 5 Ether per token to get in. And in the pool, there's 10 Ether. Now comes the interesting part where people actually use these tokens. Now they want to decide, hang on, we want to figure out what's good technical analysis, and we want to add tokenized skin in the game through those signals, not just sharing it. To put it in there, you need to be able to stake these tokens to specific curators. Person A thinks, I'm a good curator, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to stake the token to myself, and the subtopic is PA, which is technical analysis. Person B does the same, and overall in the subtopic there are now 3 staked tokens. So 3 out of the 4 supply is now staked into this specific subtopic. And then what they do is they now go and use that backing that they have, these specific curators, and they curate information. Just like a normal upvote or a like, right? It's the same kind of action. And so these signals would generally be something like person A and person B backs the specific technical analysis that says Ether is going to go to $1,000, which means everyone likes that idea. 5% upvoted. Person A only backs technical analysis 2, which means it's only 66% of the people upvoted that. Person B backs 33%. And no one backs TA4 because it says the price will go to 0. So in this way, the community tries to curate good information and good signals. And if they're successful with this, then people would start attracting attention to this group doing good technical analysis. And that someone else would want to come in because 1, they want to be a part of this, and 2, they think they can do a better job. So hopefully then you get this group to coordinate around this specific topic. Now you can start doing things as well with a specific token. It doesn't have to be technical analysis. Group communication isn't just about figuring out what's best for the group. We share inside jokes, and maybe they share funny memes in this topic. Maybe they share news as well, right? So it can be staked to different subtopics. And through this, it helps to add skin in the game to produce novel information. New users who want to participate in the in-group can come in and help coordinate. And then good signals get attention, more coordination happens, more wants to get in. And this feedback loop keeps going until there's a marginal return to the value of the coordination being generated. And this is going to happen at some point. And so person A decides, you know what, I'm not getting any value here anymore, I'm leaving. And so what they do is, they take their 2 tokens, which is 2 out of 4 of them, they paid a total of 5 Ether for those tokens. There's 5 Ether in the pool. Because they have 50% of this, they can just take the 5 out with them, which means at this point they broke even, but it could be a profit or a loss. And the total supply is now back to 2, which means the important part here is the algorithm adjusted and the price went down again to get in. Right? So the value token grows and shrinks as the community and the interest in the specific meme or topic grows and shrinks. So that was a quick crash course on what that would look like in general. But the concept is very generic because I think it can be applied for many different things besides something like this. And it's really open to a lot of different ways, which you only think about, do we want to coordinate and curate around something where we don't think we need a traditional corporation? We don't need different things. We want to have the ability to produce more novel information when there's a critical mass in conversation. So you can do things like, what about monetizing open source projects? You curate on what pull requests should be merged. You think about what features should be added to a new project. What about Ethereum standards? Like, should we adopt this standard or not, right? What about different subreddits? What about curating funny information? Doge, we do Doge there. What about your realm that you're with in World of Warcraft? What about different Bitcoin subreddits when people want to not agree with each other anymore? What about music discovery? Genre discovery, dubstep, techno, rock, whatever your favorite genre is. What about people? I want Vitalik to pay attention to what conferences he should go to. I think he should check out this research. I think I want his advice, so I'm going to curate that information so that he pays attention to that. So there's a lot of different ways this could be reused. Coming back to the decentralized band project, which I really want to redo at some point, right? Because I think the economics are better. What about curating different releases? What about standards? What about where different gigs are being played, right? What about art? Vaporwave or glitch art? You know, there's many different things here. And coming back to the Rare Pepe cards. The Rare Pepe system has like this foundation where they verify the cards. But you can do this through this system where the community verifies the cards. They think what is the funniest ones or the best ones, right? What about virtual worlds? What about coordinating a decentralized virtual world where people can decide what needs to be at specific coordinates? What about things like this virtual world as kings? Who gets to be the king? What's to be the next expansion? What if you can co-create what the canon of the virtual world is? Everyone can write canon, and people vote or curate what's the best canon of the world. And during this whole process, it's not as if any of this can be done in general, but the cool thing about this is if this works, then everyone can actually earn value from doing this. Like, they're not doing it just in their free time. A lot of people do this in altruistic reasons, right? We want to connect, we want to collaborate, but now they can actually earn from doing this. And the protocol has different extensions. There are things like the possibility to use different cost curves. I think that will matter for different kind of projects. You can do things like batch auctions in there. You can even do initial token launches to bootstrap some of these markets. Probably the most important one is the ability to add beneficiaries. So in this process where you're buying and selling this token, you can have a beneficiary which receives some portion of the fees. And in that way, you can actually fund a startup through a curation market. But that introduces new legal issues where you then have to consider if you're actually minting a security or not. And then finally, it will be extended to allow not just like you have Ether and you buy a token, but what about other tokens you can use, or even things like reputation as a cost to get in, or you can even recreate Bitcoin with a model like this using proof of work. So there's different extensions here. And the cool thing is, 2 weeks ago, I put up the first code. So it's available at consensus/curation markets. And so the first code is just the smart contracts, and it has just the most generic version of it, which is the ability to mint these tokens for any topic that you want. You can copy the code, deploy it to any topic, and then it allows you to bond it to curators and then vote on the information. There's no front end yet, so it's very just like developer bare bones stuff. I want people to come look at the code. There's been people that have done some bug fixes out there, but this specific project is still only about 30% of my time. I'm still mostly working on Ujo, which is a music platform. So I'm putting this out there because I want people to experiment with this and see if these economics work, because it's still an open-ended question. So the great thing is we have something like Ethereum available where we can just put it out there and make it easier for people to start experimenting with this. So please go to Consensus Curation Markets if you're a developer, and please go test it out and fork it and give me feedback. A lot of people have come to me and given me various feedback from the protocol level design to like ideas they have for this. So it's very exciting, and I think it's a very interesting progression. You know, coming back from the day in 2013 when Dogecoin first arrived, and I thought there's something here, to getting here a few years later, I think we're on the right path. And I hope to see a future where we can build these new networks of value. I think it will allow a lot of people to have new kinds of agency and be empowered in new ways. And that's curation markets with an exclamation mark. Thank you. That's it. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So for the way that you have the payment structure set up, or rather the way that people join one of these curation markets, it seems to favor like the early adopters, right, the people who find out about it first.
Yeah.
And traditionally, mavens aren't always the earliest adopters, but are probably the kind of people that you want to attract to these curation markets. So how could you kind of lower the barrier of entry for people who find out about it late, but are the ideal person for this curation market?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question. The goal is that if people think they are a good curator for a specific topic, they would find it somehow, but it's not necessarily the case. One of the things that I want to do with this thing is, this goes a bit more meta, is to have a curation market for curation markets, right? So it's like
community
turtles all the way down kind of thing. which would allow it to surface these things before in the right times. So you can find them before, if you think it's going to get big, then you can join in early and be rewarded proportionally for doing good curation. But one of the reasons why I like the continuous token model where the community grows and shrinks over time is that it does allow people to get in without having to buy this token from someone else, right? So if you think this price is reasonable, you can just get in. You don't have to go to an exchange to buy this token, right? So, which I like. It allows more people to get in, and so you can get in and get out simply through buying and selling from the smart contract, right? So, in that way, we don't have to rely so much on external infrastructure to do this. But it is an open-ended question. That's where the cost curves stuff come in. Maybe there's a different curve, because currently the curve just goes like it's linear for the most part, and then it goes eventually exponential, and that. The exponential end of the thing at the end was mostly from my master's research that I did, which was around like if you add another person to a conversation, the amount of conversations increased by the amount of people in the room. So it's sort of you have to curtail it at some point. But maybe there's better curves. Like maybe it should go like this, and then be more open later on. I don't know. So we'll see. Yeah. Any other questions?
One point here. So like this was a lot of very good information. I think I got most of it, but I probably will, hopefully will get more of it after I get to read some of those papers. But I wanted to ask, how does this relate to some of the other projects that are out in the space? So for example, Steemit, these are all similar concepts,
yes.
which I understand, but I'm not that familiar with. So,
So there are different projects in this space that are trying to tackle this from different areas. It's sort of, one way to describe it is like the attention economy, which is like trying to figure out how to make money from just the effort you put in from your attention. So basic attention token is one where it's like reassessing the way the relationship between the advertiser and the user and the publisher works, which I think is cool, cool experiment. And then Steemit is sort of, Steemit has very similar prospects to this, or ideas. And the cool thing about Steemit is they've had their protocol in the wild for a while, so they've had opportunity to test some of these assumptions already, which is awesome. But the thing to me about Steemit that's always been interesting is there's this concept of like, I do things in Steemit so that I can get people to come back in and stay in this feedback loop, or attract new people in this feedback loop. But it brings up the question about like, you need to get people in to understand what Steemit is. And so it's like, you kind of get to the question of like, who are the people of Steemit? Because these are the people that I want to belong to, right? What is that? And so it's sort of saying, that community does develop over time, but it's like saying, who are the people of Reddit? You get the stereotype of what a Redditor is, in the same way there would be stereotype of what a Steemit user is. And so like, I feel like you can go a lot more granular than just like a platform level architecture to get people into feedback loop like that. So that's why it's topic-based, not sort of platform-based protocols. The other thing here that I focus on as well is, actually Ned from Steemit told me that he's working on similar things on Steemit, where different topics could have tokens as well, instead of just being this one platform token. But he said like he wants to do things where people can sell these tokens. But a lot of these curation market ideas for me is about thinking about the real bottom layer about how these tokens are created. Because at any point in time where you have to get to a point where someone is selling some of these tokens, you have to call a lawyer, you have to go through months of due diligence to figure out if this is above board or not. So I want these tokens to be created without there being centralized parties, right? That's why Bitcoin and Ethereum is like that in itself. There's no Bitcoin company giving the coins to someone. So that was one of the goals, to make sure we can mint these things and people agree that it's fair, right? If it's a fair minting process, essentially. Yeah.
I have two questions, if I may. One is probably very simple for you to answer. What are the features of a group to have tokens for itself? So not all groups use tokens. So when comes the point that they do actually need a token to exchange stuff? Yeah. And the second is more to the curation markets part. As far as I got you, if I got you right, you are trying to form groups that are curating more information. And as with the ETH trader, they will come to a point where you know, they have the psychological group bias, and you know, they will probably find information and do research that is speaking to the greatness of Ether, and that they, you know, it could be right, it could be wrong, but there's bias in the group, and probably also with a lot of the curation markets groups.
Yeah. So the first question.
Could you repeat the question?
So the first question was about like when, if we imagine that there's a bunch of groups that will use these things, when do they need a token, right? And the second question is the sort of like the concept around these groups having psychological bias towards certain information and not necessarily objectively curating the best information. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the first question is, when would these groups have tokens? That's an open-ended question. My gut feels that if there's, I want this thing to exist for a very long tail of things, right? So if there's any problem in coordination and we think that injecting these tokens in it, this sort of use-stress response to coordination, we will hopefully see better coordination. But like how deep that goes, I'm not sure. It might mean that it limits itself to a certain size, and it doesn't make sense to mint a token for this chair right here, right? Well, I don't want to coordinate around who gets to sit in the chair, right? It's pointless. But maybe machines want to do more coordination on a subhuman level, like we have high-frequency trading. No human can trade there, but maybe there's ways for machines to coordinate on things like this. So maybe there is reasons to go much lower. And the concept of psychological bias, I don't necessarily think that the point is to necessarily create the best information. It's to create information that's relevant for the group, right? Or like that would attract attention. And so you still have the concept where news media sites is like the whole fake news thing. It's like Marshall Pinsky said it well. He said, it doesn't matter if the news is fake, but if the attention is real, right? So these groups might actually end up doing things like, you know, doing the weirdest, craziest things because that attracts the most attention. And that's why Dogecoin became so popular, because they started doing even weirder stuff. They started sponsoring bobsled teams, right, to attract attention to their currency. So it could create like weird sense of like tokenized tribalism, digital tribalism, that it, in some extent, worries me a bit as well. But I think in general, hopefully, it creates a lot of value that most people will be useful from it. I think that's good. Just if there's one more question, then I think we can have some beers. I think you already asked a question.
Yeah.
Just that's fine.
Yeah, I guess we'll see if this one's the last question. Do you see a lot of value in multiple competing curation markets? Or if there's one that really saturates the entire market, does that suffice?
I love that, because I wanted, originally the previous iteration had like a global namespace, right, which is like to allow people to get to coordinate better. It's like there's only one Ethereum curation market, for example. But I think it's too early. I think it's too early to say this is the best cost curves, this is the best implementation. I want there to exist competing curation markets, both in like trying different permutations, but even different curation markets with the same protocols competing against each other. You know, it will be sort of the survival of the fittest attention. And I think that will be more interesting. And that's why the concept of eventually having, once you battle tested a bunch of the stuff, to have a curation market, 4 curation markets to find these best ones and have them compete against each other. Because it could be at some point where one, like let's say we create one where we want to get Vitalik Buterin's attention, and Vitalik's not paying attention to it, he's not looking at it, and suddenly he goes like, that's a good idea that this community generated, and suddenly everyone's going to start rushing into that one and not another one, because that one didn't succeed in getting attention or good curation. So I think there's going to be sort of this weird or like organic curation markets fighting against each other kind of thing, which should be interesting. Hopefully people don't use too much money. Cool, thank you. Thank you very much. Get some beers.